realize that even if I believe that Christ is the truth in some significant sense, that my own grasp of that is very much limited, that I'm blinded by all sorts of interests that I have. And so kind of, I always believed also in something like reverse prophetism. It's not only that prophets are prophets to the outside, prophets can learn from the outside. The world can prophesy to you. That's the reverse prophetism, I believe, is a term that Paul Tillich used. And if you approach, I think when I approach university setting in this way, rejoicing in whatever I find is compelling, interesting, important that's happening, wherever it's happening, and go with big wide eyes and tell me more about this. This is amazing what you guys are doing here. And if I go with a stance of humility, I find that people are then end up being interested in kinds of things that I have to say. And I think this kind of pluralistic exchange of ideas that ends up being very much enriching for everyone.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. That was a wonderful comment. And I think the whole notion of adversarial relationship that some people feel toward a college or university, I don't think it's terribly productive, and I don't think it's really accurate. I agree with you. I don't think that, my career is like 30 years now. I can't recall any incident. Now maybe there's something I don't know, or somebody's been working behind the scenes to kind of thwart me or to frustrate my career, but I've never faced opposition because I was a person of faith. It's not to say some people don't, perhaps they do, but for me it's never been an issue. And I think to be honest, part of the reason for that is that, coming back to what I said earlier, it has always been important for me to be an impeccable scholar as much as I possibly could. If I were sloppy, then I think people would have grounds for coming after me, and justifiably so. But I've never felt that sort of adversarial relationship that many people talk about or fear in college universities.
I mean, I often find that if there isn't from the university itself adversarial something, I find that there is a kind of puzzlement and lack of understanding, and maybe looking down upon, especially what we do up on the God Hill in Divinity School, right? At Yale University, right? So there may be some of that that's going on, but then I'm not sure how to apportion quote unquote blame for this misunderstanding. Right? So if I have a colleague who we're together in a classroom and he wants to say something about religion, and he then picks up a pill from his pocket, and he says, I also believe in something. I believe that when I take this pill, that I'm going to get better. Religious people believe that they are going to get better if they pray, and then I think, or I believe in science, and religious people believe that God created the world in 6 days. Then I almost am embarrassed, because I feel it would be as if I were asked to give a lecture in astrophysics, and my knowledge of astrophysics is kind of equivalent to somebody's who's about 8 years old. In terms of, I have catechetical knowledge of astrophysics, and here I'm giving a lecture or saying something about it, because everything he said is just so off the wall, right? So completely 6-year-old's understanding of religion that I don't know what to say, right? And no wonder he's then troubled by my praying. If he thinks if I pray I can't take a pill, right? Because those are competitive accounts of how God feels, how God heals, then okay, that's a reason for misunderstanding. But my response to that cannot be I feel adversity from this colleague. I just feel he doesn't understand what he's talking about. And my challenge then is, how do I articulate for him a much more complex understanding of Christian faith that isn't in contrast to sciences, that is in contrast to technologies that we develop. And my sense is that and I think Christians are at fault with that, because we think that we either have to, the main interest of religion is to explain reality and to manipulate reality. Religions are primitive science and primitive technology. And if you see religions as primitive science and technology, you lost to begin, it's gone, right? You're never going to retrieve any solid ground, but that's not what faiths are. I think faiths are, all world faiths, Christian faith included, it's not simply primitive science, primitive technology. It tells you about this preference of human beings to transcendence, and you can very well have, science can have very well competitive advantage to explaining certain aspects of reality, and technology can have competitive advantage over help of prayer, and I won't be troubled by that at all.
And pick up on one of the notion of pluralism, I think, and this kind of circles back to the original question I think Andrew too. The difference between Dartmouth College today in 2014 and Moore's Charity School back in the 18th century was that at Moore's Charity School in the early years of Dartmouth College, the frame of reference and the rhetoric was entirely Christian. Now we are living in a pluralistic context, obviously. And I think the challenge for people of faith, for believers, is to know how to have a conversation within that pluralistic context, which means that we can no longer commandeer the conversation and use the vocabulary simply of Christianity or faith. We have to learn how to talk about our faith within the larger context of this conversation. And that's not always easy. That's a bit of a challenge sometimes. And what I object to is people who, and as Miroslav said, I think tend a little bit more toward the conservative end of things. People who kind of spout what I would say are delusional schemes about, you know, retaking the university for Jesus or reinstating Christianity at the center of the core of the university. First of all, that's not going to happen. And second, I don't think it's, I agree with Miroslav, I don't think that's a good thing. I think we have to be citizens within this much larger, beautifully pluralistic context, which means we can't dominate the conversation, but we can participate, and that's where the real witness occurs.
I don't want to allow either. Wow, looks like nobody has any questions. Hayden.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious to hear whether both of you feel like there's a difference between sort of a pluralistic university on the one hand and a secular university on the other. Because when I think about my own experience at Dartmouth, I agree that I don't think it's been antagonistic to my faith. I think that'd be way too strong of language to talk about my experience, but I feel like there's a more subtle notion sometimes of inquiry being unbiased, while Christianity and my faith convictions are somehow biased. And that's something that really doesn't make sense to me. I find that to be not true at all, and really, really like harmful to intellectual inquiry, not just by me, but by people of other faith traditions, etc., on campus. And so I just wonder if what your guys' thoughts on that would be.
Well, I think there are tendencies in the university, as there are tendencies in certain segments of the culture, certain segments of the university, certain segments of broader culture, maybe more in Europe, Australia than here, is to have something like secular exclusivism. It's kind of secular self-perception, but it's not pluralistic in its own self-perception. It's exclusivistic. And I think to the extent that we find that in universities, I think that will be a matter of conversation, and in some ways, I think, push against this self-understanding, which I think is an ideology. So if you say Australia is a secular society, it's an ideology with a certain interest that are being pursued by the claim, because certain political arrangements are going to follow from that. And my argument then in that public space would be, I think you have to step back, you have to ask yourself whether that's actually true to the reality. Pretty soon you'll discover, well, it really doesn't seem like it. There's a certain form of secularism in Yale, but not secular worldview and exclusivism that seems just not right. And we have to kind of catch up with the idea that religious traditions are there to stay for a while, and out of sheer respect for their being there and the claims that they make, you have to conceive of our societies, I think also of our universities, as pluralistic rather than secular institutions, right? So there's just like there are really radical Christians who want to take over a university for a particular religious conviction, or like there are folks who want to take whole countries for a particular religious conviction, so also are secular folks. We can name them all, right? We don't have to be coy about this. I lived in a country which thought that that was exactly what needs to happen. Large swaths of the world, in one part, were exclusively secularistic, and some of such secularistic tendencies are present, I think, in our universities, and we need to talk about it.
Okay, so I think that, like, recently, especially Dartmouth, they have been getting a bit of a bad rap with diversity and inclusivity and all of that, and I think that